We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift of life. These words are often said in Unitarian Universalist churches, and I was so pleased to see them in today's program. They are a statement of the purpose of why we are here. And it's always more pleasant to focus on the glories, not so much on the darker side. But I feel impelled by the times to bring us to conversation about the darker side of life. There is an aura of fear abroad, a vague, uneasy fear that none of us are as safe as we thought we were. We have learned to expect faraway, tragic events, like the planes that crash and the wars that seem to be seething all over the nation, and climate change. We are horrified, but not personally threatened so much by these reports. Surely we think such things could not happen here, not here in America, the home of the free and the home of the brave. Surely residents of America and our hometowns will continue to be safe, and our fellow residents will be sane, reasonable, and rational. Not so. Sadly, not so. In the past few years, we've been seeing vicious acts of violence in America. Random, irrational violence close to home, some even here in Fort Worth. This sermon was originally written back in 1982, and I pulled it out because the feeling of public trust being broken by the Tylenol incidents is what I'm feeling now with things that have happened recently. 32 years ago was the Tylenol incident, and today I bring out the old sermon and find it is more pertinent than ever. Back then in '82, I was frightened by a stranger who poisoned Tylenol capsules. My faith in the public was shaken. And so we went to work, and we learned better ways to package medicines. Today you can hardly get some of them open. But at least that has renewed our trust in the pharmaceutical industry. And today, the public trust is frightened again by gun violence in schools and grocery stores and churches, and somebody was walking around Target a couple of weeks ago with guns. Are my 2 granddaughters safe in their schools? Who can I trust? Who can I depend upon? Back in '82, the morning after that Tylenol story broke, I drove to downtown Fort Worth and backed into a tiny parking space, and I was juggling back and forth with my car to get in there right, and this lady pulled up beside me. She wanted that parking space. When she figured out I was there to stay, she gave me a cold look that chilled me to the bone. And I wouldn't have thought any more about that, except that a little later in the day, I pulled up to a 4-way stop sign. There were 3 other cars, one on each street. We were all there at the same time. So who's going to go first? Well, one pulls in and another comes and stops and starts and stops, jerks. And you know, normally something like that is funny and somebody will start laughing and waving. But not that day. They all scowled, and I scowled too, and finally got through that intersection. But I was angry at the disgusting behavior of my fellow human beings. Later that evening, I was paying for something at the 7-Eleven, and this man suddenly stepped up next to me at the counter. He had a brown paper bag, and he reached into it, and he pulled out an empty Coke bottle. He just wanted a refund, and I had panicked. You know, this is not a nice way to live. And that's when the idea of the sermon began in me. I began to think about what was happening that I would respond that way. In fright and fear and panic. 3 everyday incidents, nothing unusual. but I had felt fear and hostility way beyond the norm. Now, I'm one of these naive people who trusts most people. But I had to face the harsh reality that there are demented strangers running around out there, and they do inflict violence, irrationally, in random directions. And the governments and the systems that we have set in place to protect ourselves do not always work, and they're not always complete, and the plans to fix them grind very slowly indeed. I wondered if others might be feeling fear also. And if so, this is a time to grieve. If we would all begin to feel hostility and fear towards strangers and each other, then chaos would result. Our society is predicated upon an assumption that most people will exercise reason and goodwill most of the time. That's a matter of public trust. And if that public trust breaks down, then we will regress as a society. And we might be rather miserable. In the midst of these black thoughts, I began to question some of the basic things that I've been taught since I was a girl. I've been taught that people are wise enough to govern themselves, so that there will be personal freedom for them and others, and quality of life for all. I've been taught that most people are generous enough to take care of something when they see the need. And certainly, things in this church demonstrate that that's true here. I am deeply shaken when I find myself doubting that people are wise enough to govern themselves well, or when I doubt that people are generous enough to give care when it's needed. I hate it that just this week in 2014, I heard voices saying that the children who have crossed our borders from South America should be sent back home. To what? To danger, to probable harm, rape, mutilation, and death. For heaven's sakes, this country comes from immigrants. We all have immigrant ancestors, every single one of us. My ancestors came from France, Germany, and England. Where did yours come from? Call them out. Where did they come from? Germany. Any more?
Irish.
Lots of Irish and English and Wales. And why was it that your grandparents or great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents left the land of their birth and came to this country? Why did they come? They came for a better life, for some personal freedom, for the right to do what they wanted to do. That's all they wanted, a better life. And yet, fellow Americans are saying, some of them, send those children back home, where they came from. Are we really a selfish people who won't give a little help to those children? On the radio as I drove over here, I heard the mayor of what was one of the cities in Los Angeles talking about what his city plans to do for those immigrant children. And I was proud to read in the paper about the Catholic bishop from Fort Worth, Texas, who is really backing the support that Catholic charities are giving to these children, a place to live. And if you want to do something, you can call your Democratic committee here on Race Street, and they'll tell you the kinds of things they want people to buy and bring over in a cloth bag, toiletries for these kids, which they will then take to the Catholic charities place for them. I read this sermon to my favorite critic in residence, my husband, Dwayne. He found it very depressing. And of course he told me that. Well, I know it's depressing. But I think it's better to name the things that eat away at our hearts and our intestines. Name them and discuss them rather than ignore them. So we might just learn something.
You can't just assume that everybody cares. You've got to talk about things. And as this reading in Time magazine pointed out in 1982, the value of the maniac in our midst is that he or she, point out the fact that the world does not work very well with every man for himself. Life only progresses and avoids hysteria through various mutual dependencies. And there, in the Gospel according to Time magazine, is the seed of a new and better way of doing things. A new ethic, perhaps a renewed ethic, that would rebuild private trust and public trust. An ethic that needs to permeate government and industry and family and individuals, you and me. The ethic is mutual dependency, a commitment to the well-being of others as well as ourselves. Now, don't tell me this can't happen. It has to happen. The age of total self-reliance and total individualism needs to be over with and done and finished. And an age of interdependence and interconnection and mutual reliance needs to begin. Now, this is very tough for you to use to hear, because who was it that wrote the definitive essay on self-reliance? Ralph Waldo Emerson. And we've always believed in the things in that essay, the dignity of each individual and the right of people to seek their own happiness. And we mustn't abandon that. I'm not saying that. But we need to recognize that the world just doesn't work very well with every man for himself. We are mutually dependent, and what each of us does will affect others. And we must move from total self-reliance to a sense of mutual reliance. Many years ago, I used to drive to Denton once a month to preach. Going north on 35 West, I would often see this brown van parked along the road, and a woman nearby with a big trash bag, and she was collecting litter that she stuffed into her van. I thought that was inspiring. What a neat way to spend Sunday morning. I haven't started doing that yet, but things like it maybe. And in 1982, there was an article in the paper about a young boy in Arlington who needed a liver transplant. And a week later, there was a second article, and the readers of the Star-Telegram in Arlington had contributed $14,000. $14,000 is a lot of money. And eventually there was enough money to pay for that transplant, and this boy lived. Now, those deeds were performed by total strangers, probably some friends too, but there were a lot of strangers in there. And my faith in people begins to be restored when I hear stories like that. Back when I wrote this original sermon, outside the window of my office, there was a white cat walking down the driveway. It lays down and rolls over on its back, black tail twitching, soft white belly open to the sun. A young boy, one of my sons, wandered down the driveway after the cat and laid down on the warm pavement beside the cat and began to stroke it. Birds twittered. For a moment, time froze, sweet, lovely. The cat, the boy, the birds, the sun. These things help restore my faith in life generally. We are dependent on so many things and so many people. If we can evolve into a new ethic of mutual reliance, it might involve a lot of work, a lot of commitment to long-term things like people, ideals, callings, institutions. Now imagine for a moment, this is your homework, imagine that you are at a party and there's new people there. And instead of folks asking, "Ben, what do you do for a living?"
you ask this question: what do you do to build a better world? What do you do to enhance public trust? Now, if you actually did that at a party, you better be prepared with your own answer to that, because they're going to ask you what. At this point in my sermon writing, back in 1982, my young son walked into my office, and I said to him, "Well, what have you done today to build a better world?" He never batted an eye. He just said, "I fed the cats," and walked out. That's the answer to how we're going to rebuild the public trust. As we go about our daily rounds, we do those little chores that feed the pets and soothe the family and take care of society, and rebuild public trust. You might find out or realize there's abundant evidence that people are mostly decent and generous. And perhaps you will have a new awareness of your dependency on others and your many mutual reliances. So I leave you with a question. What are you going to do this week to build public trust? Let us stand and sing hymn number 119. Once to every man and nation comes a moment to decide.